This is Al. I'll make another video for BlueFirePoker. This is going to be part 3 of my BlueFirePoker member Eric's play. Um, Eric is a pretty decent 30-year-old, 50-year-old player. In my initial review of his game, I noticed missed opportunities, missed stealing opportunities in his game. Through video 1, I thought I saw some missed isolation opportunities. We also saw a post flop that, and we really haven't found, I think, any good signs of this yet so far, but for the play he sent me 85,000 hands of 4,600 play. There was clearly an issue with flopped value extraction, flop top pair, top kicker plus. Win rate was quite low there, and we also saw that when he's facing a turn bet, facing river bet, his play is very strong, so it has to do with his betting. Which would likely be missed bets or maybe some bet sizing that's causing problems. Not quite sure. And we really haven't seen any good examples of things being missed, and we haven't seen that many hands. But that's the type of things we're looking for. Particularly noticed win rate issues when the previous street was checked around. And since his calling issues are fine, it's probably a missed bet issue in spots like that. His play in big pots as the aggressor, the 3-better and the squeezer, and barreling is very, very strong. So also his play versus 3-bets. I'm looking at my notes on the side right now, make sure I'm not saying anything incorrect. His play versus 3-bet was okay. His play versus 4-bet was very strong. So yeah, those are the type of things we're looking for. On his play when he had squeeze opportunities, very strong. Okay, so let's keep replaying hands. Yeah, so we on the anonymous table up here, table 2, we had a borderline hand against a half-stack player. This player's stats are coming in a little bit fishy, a little bit recreational. I don't like using the word fish. He's looking kind of like a recreational player here. You know, if he limped, I would obviously say isolate here. He min opened. He's not been opened up this many hands. If he was full stacked, this is a borderline cold call hand here, but very, very borderline. This is the type of hand that if the button min opens, I would definitely consider calling with, especially if I could see some post-flop leaks in their game. Against the cutoff, probably just better to let it go. Bottom right, ace-4 suited, I would be opening that up. Okay, good. I thought he was going to fold there for a minute. I feel like baby-suited aces are always an open. Mid-suited aces, mid-suited connectors. I like to see a recreational player in the blind. Since the player to our right looks like a recreational player, I would be opening up all my mid-suited connectors, all my suited aces. Yeah, good. He goes a little bit larger here. I like that. We saw some previous examples where he went 3x. As an isolation, I would prefer the 4x. Now, one of the things I do as I'm playing is I'm just kind of I look at my tables, especially when it comes to my cutoff opening, just so I don't have to look at the player on my left every single time I have one of those marginal hands. And so table 1, oh no, hang on, I keep thinking on every table we're in the number 3 spot, but this is number 1 spot. So we have this player to our immediate left, which would be the cutoff. And so I'm looking at his spread between his VPIP and PFR and his 3-bet. Now this guy is absolutely the guy we're looking to widen up our cutoff ranges against. He has a 3-point spread between VPIP and PFR, which is basically reflective of cold calls. Yeah, I'd fold that 5-8 suited since he went ahead and min raised. So this guy does very little cold calling, and as a bonus, very little 3-betting. And so all those borderline hands I talked about in a previous video, I would be using here. Talking about certainly suited connectors, but also suited 1-gappers, Jack-9 suited, 10-8 suited, Queen-9 suited, probably Queen-8 suited, probably down to King-5 suited, possibly hands like 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10 offsuit. And probably, since this guy's at the extreme edge of button versus cutoff type players, well, I mean, I'm extrapolating from his 3-bet and his, better pause this because I'm getting missing action on other tables. I'm extrapolating from that he's probably tied in that spot. I think that's a good extrapolation. Now, if you have the data in your pop-ups, you can actually go and look at what is his cold call button versus cutoff, what is his 3-bet button versus cutoff. But when somebody's this extreme, it's good enough just to assume that they are. Now, like I said, in my current note caddy generated HUD, I actually have badges, and I have a yellow BT, a yellow SB, and a yellow BB for each of the 3 remaining positions. And if they are clearly exploited in those spots versus a cutoff open, they get that badge. And I do that. But I know the vast majority of you players that are watching this don't have my package. So just trying to give you some general numbers here. Now if he's more borderline, then maybe it's worth just checking out and seeing. And so I pretty much already know without looking on each table who I'm going to go after. And so all these borderline hands are in my range. And so whereas my default range is something like 22.5, I'm looking probably closer to 32% versus this player. Now on the anonymous table, I really don't have enough data to determine anything yet. I'm gonna, since this guy's not playing a full stack, I'm gonna assume he's a little bit more fishy, and I don't want to go too deep. Maybe I end up going 24%, adding in a few more stronger suited hands, but that's about it. Table 4, we have a player with a tight VPIP to PFR, but he has a high 3-bet. Now, when players are a little bit more marginal like this, it'd probably be good to go ahead and look at his 3-bet button versus cutoff, because a lot of times his 3-bet can come from small blind and big blind versus button and small blind opens, and not so much button versus cutoff. And if his button versus cutoff was decently reasonable, he would go ahead and get the full extended range like this player in table 1 does. If his 3-bets is a little bit higher, a little bit more on the average side as far as the frequency goes, maybe he gets part of that range. But I would definitely, based on this information, I'd be able to open up a few more hands versus him, especially hands that are defendable, potentially defendable out of position. Like I could look at things like his fold versus 4-bet, which is 58%. And so whereas generally the ace-2 through ace-8 off are kind of on the low end of my additional cutoff opening hands, if I stopped and I was aware of his fold versus 4-bet, they would actually be at the top of my additional hands, because then they would become part of my 4-bet bluff range. And then table 3, the last table, based upon very little information here, this player would be getting my full extended range. There's no gap between VPIP and PFR, and so far there's no 3-bets. Now, of course, we only have 18 hands, but when somebody is at the very extreme of tight in this particular spot, we're going to go ahead and accept that as valid until they start showing us that it's not. This is not an actual reflection of their play. But anyway, so the action here. Min open and go 5x. Okay, so I was talking in I think the very first video about my work on the analysis of button min opening, how I'm almost certain that button min opening is not ideal. Now, it's actually a lot more work than you can imagine trying to figure out these things, and there's a lot of factors I've got to consider, and it's also a massive processor load to run these. But the other spot that I've done is big blind versus button min opens. And the filtering set for this, full stack versus full stack, a full stack reg versus full stack reg, and then I did a number of different three betting sizings versus the min open. And 4x came out to be the very worst sizing. I didn't really look at, I didn't look bigger than like 4.4x, so I'm not even sure where 5x would do, but my analysis was very clear that 3.5x is the ideal, is the most profitable sizing. Now, there's always unknowns in situations like this, you know, and I've got to do a little bit more work on that. This is not a high priority project for me, just something I'm kind of working on the side as I have time. I plan to make it a bigger project very end of this year when I finish some of my other current projects. And I actually need to factor some other things in there, such as 3-bet frequency, which becomes extremely difficult to do. But before I can be certain on there, because I have to be concerned about, you know, where, you know, what sort of 3-bet frequencies my data is coming from, and if, say, like the 4x 3-betters had a lot different range than, say, like the 3.5x or the 3x 3-betters, that might change my analysis, but I'm pretty sure it won't. And the difference was so big that I feel really comfortable saying that 3.5x is the way to go. And there's a lot of things that come into play, and I started really looking into this because as part of my Pokemetrics analysis for my clients, I noticed this trend of everybody that was doing larger size 3-bet bluffing versus the button, their value hands were underperforming and their bluff hands were underperforming. And I'm not even sure if mathematically it makes total sense, but I wondered if like a 4x or slightly over 4x open kind of hit this sweet spot where they were getting too little action with their value hands, basically causing too many folds with their value hands, but they weren't getting enough folds to maintain profitability with bluff hands. Because once you start 4xing your 3-bet bluffs, I think you roughly jump the needed fold frequency like 5 or 6%, and a lot of players will fall in that 5 or 6% change in needed bluff. And I don't know, I just saw the pattern so consistently that I really thought there was something there. And now that I've done the analysis and it matches up, well, actually, before that, I was actually a proponent of something like just over 3x, like 3.1 to 3.25. My analysis actually showed that those weren't bad, but 3.5x was clearly the winner over that. So just something to remember, and I don't know anything more than that. I don't yet know as far as best sizing versus half stacks, best sizing versus 2.5x opens or anything there. Just this one particular spot I've done, and the clear winner was 3.5x. Now I know here we're a little bit deeper here, so that was probably part of his reasoning here. But honestly, I don't know. I just think you force too many folds here when you go that big, and yeah, I just don't think it's a good idea. Now, if you know your player's weak, or you know your opponent doesn't like to fold versus 3-bets, yeah, bigger's better. You might as well take advantage of their inability to fold. But we don't see, in fact, over a small sample size, this player always folds versus 3-bets, which is, if anything, a reason to make your 3-bets smaller. I paused the video because I thought he was going to 3-bet 8s here, which I thought would be a mistake, but he ended up calling. under the gun +1, I think King Jack off is an okay open. Um, it's one of those things, if you're struggling, having trouble winning is probably not a good open. Um, if you're a decent winner, I think it's fine. I think his barreling up here is absolutely mandatory. Um, Although I will say, in lower stakes game where the rake is higher, these hands become much more questionable. It would be helpful if one of these two players were a recreational player, and they're definitely not. Um, uh, uh, we'd actually like the player to our right to be in the blinds to make sure this is okay, but I think it's okay. Um, yeah, up here top, firing multiple barrels here. Um, yeah, I'd also fire this river. On the guy short stacked, yeah, just put them all in on the river. Ah, unlucky. Yeah, he's looking at part of this is cut off, but he's looking at positional 3-bet, positional squeezing in spots like that. Um, there's not a lot you can do in this particular spot. A little bit of a waste, I think, to be looking at data there, because you're just too worried about the that weak of a hand, and he'd have to be squeezing an awful lot for you to be able to call there, and it's oftentimes going to go 3-way, and that hand's just too weak, I think, to play in that particular spot. But it's good that he's looking at stuff like that just to see, or it's good that he's generally looking at stuff like that just to see spots where he can potentially defend. Yeah, I think 8-4 suited here is a little bit too light to complete with. 5-8 suited, I'd complete here. But 4-8 suited is a little bit, and certainly 6-8 suited I would. But 4-8 suited is just not connected enough. And that's kind of interesting. Let's back up here just a second. So, I missed again. So, yes, we got this back here. So we're in middle position. Under the gun opens up, and he's just checking to see how does this guy open up an EP to see if he should be calling here. This particular sample is just really probably too small to get caught up on that. I would look at just the average pre-flop open of 15%, which is pretty tight, and that would allow me to put this guy, on the tight side of opening. On the flip side, it does look like this guy is probably a recreational player, which in position is going to give you a pretty good skill advantage, which kind of brings his lower opening frequency, kind of balances that out a little bit more, can allow a call. Clearly, if we were suited, we would call here. I wouldn't fault anybody for folding this. I would fold this against a tightish reg, against somebody that I perceived as being a recreational player. I would not be able to fold it. Table 3, we got ace king off. And we're getting no action. Table 2, yeah, 4x isolation, I like it. And as far as, I think I've pretty much already covered this, I think ideal isolation sizes are around 4x. I think 5x is too big, I think 3x is too small. You got to think about a sizing that's going to get the most money out of them without changing how often they want to call, and I feel like 4x does that the best. Aces table 1. Yeah, I mean, in position we 4x an open. We've already established this guy folds pretty well to 3 bets. Now I wasn't really factoring in these 2 recreational players calling, but yeah, I think that size is just too big in a spot like that. Yeah, against recreational players in 3-bet pot, I do tend to go a little bit larger sizing because they're not going to fold any piece of this. That was a nice little turn card there. I don't think we were ahead before we got that. Jack, Queen, Queen 10. Yeah, we're behind this player here. Yeah, that's always nice when that works out. But we couldn't have folded for that price on the flop, I don't think. I certainly wouldn't have. Now, if player 2, who's a little bit deeper, I think, would have jammed, then I would have considered a fold. I'd have done some math there. Yeah, pretty standard call here. We don't know enough about this player to do a 3-bet here, but so far they've been folding to 3 bets. It's kind of interesting. They've been folding 3 bets every time, and so we don't want to take a really good cold call hand and 3-bet bluff it. Not that, and I've never been a proponent of taking a hand like King Jack off and 3-betting with it. Even versus a player that likes to fold a lot. I mean, doesn't like to fold at all. This is too strong of a hand, I think, to turn it into a 3-bet bluff. And if they're folding a ton, why waste it when it's a good cold call? Now he leads out. Now why does he lead out here? The reason to lead out here is because you don't think an opponent is going to c-bet this board very often. Now this player does have a lowish c-bet, 59%, and a very but a high turn barrel, high river barrel. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, this is as a default, this would be a check call. And I mean, the flop c-bet's low enough that I might think about this, but there's a lot of hands that will c-bet here. This is a pretty good board texture. I mean, I'd be more likely to lead out a board that was like 7 or 8 high, and I had a piece of. Because I just think a player with this type of c-bet will take a ton of free cards with overcards, and I don't want to allow that. Here, I don't know. I think we can. The board texture is such that he'll bluff at it fairly often. He might protect worse hands fairly often. If we lead out here, you know, he's going to fold some hands that might have bet. Certainly the hands that would have bluffed, he'll probably fold. You know, if he's got some sort of 10x or pocket nines, you know, maybe he calls, maybe he folds. Hard to say, but yeah, I don't think this is a donk spot. As much as I like donking, I don't think this is a donk spot. Yeah, obviously, with the improvement, we're going to follow through on the turn. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that 10 because obviously the 10 was in his range, and so yeah, I don't like this sizing that's coming up here either. This sizing is too big to me. I mean, we've got a king blocker to like an ace king, king queen type of hand, and so there's not a lot of combos of those. And if he's got a hand like pocket nines, he's not calling. And I'm not saying that this guy necessarily has more 10x hands than king x hands, because that's really the question here. Is when we bet here, we're basically saying that this guy has more hands that can call that we beat than that will call that beat us. And I just don't think it's there, and especially at 1050. Now, this guy does have a high showdown, which typically means he's not going to want to fold, and so that is in our favor. So I don't think a smaller bet size, because his showdown's high. I was initially going to say bet smaller here is kind of a blocking bet, save you a little bit of money, maybe get a few more calls. But could you? I don't know, because this guy's a high showdown, so I tend to think he is going to call like a king X, might call pocket queens, just because he beats the flush, the missed flush draw, and somebody with 32% went to showdown. I know I'm dealing with too small of a sample size to assume too much here, but just to give general ideas, they're more likely to call, so this makes it a better value bet. I'm just wondering if a check is the way to go. I don't know. It's close. It's close. The showdown's making me think the bet. I'm probably leaning towards a bet, and I'm kind of liking his sizing more too. Although I do wonder if 975 might just feel a little bit smaller to him and get enough extra calls. We're really guessing here over too small sample sizes. I will say that Eric does a good job of table selecting. These are some really good tables. I'm surprised to see this on iPoker. Yeah, I agree with folding the sevens on table two. Heads up, I wouldn't be folding sevens very often here, but when somebody's willing to bet four-way, it's going to be too long of a trip to the river against a range that's probably not that wide. And even if it is wide, he's always going to have 6 outs, almost always have 6 outs to suck out on you on a future street. Now this table 3 is kind of an interesting spot that I've been wanting to talk more about, but haven't had a good hand to really do it with. Now, there's no question here that this is a call here. Now, this player's been opening up a lot of hands here. Yeah, good. I'm glad he called. And we've had to fold a lot because his fold versus 3-bet, and this is one of the few guys we have a good sample size on, his fold to 3-bet's too low, 51%, for us to do a lot of 3-bet bluffing. But I was hoping to find some marginal hands that we could take advantage of his fold versus C-bet in 3-bet pots. 50%, which is quite high. So what this guy, what these numbers indicate doing is this guy's defending a lot against the 3-bets, and he's playing fairly fit or fold on the flop. And what that means for us is that flops with high hands with high flop connectivity are now back on our range. Now, normally against a 51% fold, I wouldn't be 3-bet bluffing, say like an ace-5 suited or 7-8 suited. But once I can see that his fold versus C-bet is high, I want to use those hands with high flop connectivity. Once again, high flop connectivity means the ability to flop value hands, draws, and backdoor draws. And obviously those hands can do that much more than other hands. Now, a hand like Queen 10 suited can definitely do all that. However, I typically don't like to take a hand like Queen 10 suited and turn it into a 3-bet bluff, since it's a really, really good cold call hand against a wide min opening a button range. However, it would make money both ways. I don't know. I mean, potentially when he calls a lot versus three bets and then folds a lot on the flop, it may actually be the case that there's more money here to three bet this. Now, I know this was a potential squeeze spot, which also changes things up a little bit. But I wanted to look for an opportunity just to talk about this number combination and make sure you guys were also looking for that in a hand that was even close. We had a bunch of offsuit, non-connected stuff that would never work. But I want to make sure I address this combination because this can be one of the highest profit combinations in the game. Just guys that call a large bet and then fold a lot to the next bet. But you need to have decent flop connectivity to do that. King 10 off, standard cutoff open, especially based upon what I said before. Very standard C bet. I do like in spots like that, it looked like he's making his C bets a little bit on the smaller side. You can definitely do that a lot versus what I'm assuming are recreational players because their stack size. They're not going to notice you going bigger for value, smaller for bluffs, and especially on good board textures like that, you really should take advantage of that. Okay, now this is definitely a three bet because of, I wish I would have waited just a minute till we got the actual hand we were looking for, but this is exactly what you want to be doing against this combination. This hand's too weak in the small blind to ever call with, I think, especially against the cutoff. And so great hand to three bet bluff with and take advantage of his flop fold. Table 4, know I'm going to fold this. Yeah, I like this. We don't have a lot of data here, but clearly this guy's opened up quite a few buttons. He's been folding a lot versus three bets. King 9 suited is probably a profitable cold call in this spot, but you know, if someone's going to fold a lot to three bets, your cards really don't matter. Now, ideally, I would like, you know, like a King 5 suited over like a King 9 off. That suitedness can add an awful lot of value to it. But I also, when players are getting to the extremes of folding. Now, I don't want to extrapolate too much off of 223 hands, but this guy's folded to every single three bet in 223 hands. Pretty good sign he's folding a lot, and it's highly probable that you'll make money. Probably more money three bet bluffing this hand than you would calling it. Now, if it's a little bit stronger, like say King 10, I'd prefer a cold call. That little bit of difference, that two Broadway, I like just to. I'm certain those are nicely profitable cold calls against a wide min opening button range. But once you drop down one more notch to King 9 off, a little bit less certain of that. And so, yeah, I'm okay with this. I'm definitely okay with this. Now, and I don't really talk about this going this light a lot, but I do myself. And one of the reasons I don't talk about it a lot is, well, first off, a lot of people disagree with it, and I don't really like, you know, getting into debates about stuff that I'm not absolutely sure of. And the thing I'm not sure about is how much can I get away with this. And so, again, because whenever a player is min opening the button versus me, I'm looking to play as many hands as possible, and one of the ways you do that is maximizing the use of your entire range against high fold versus three bets. Which, if you're going to do the most, you're going to end up three bet bluffing some of these weaker offsuit hands that aren't a great cold call. But I also worry if they catch me three bet bluffing, say like a king four offsuit type hand, two or three times. I worry that I radically change what they're doing, because that's really going to stick out. Now, is a king four suited going to stick out like that? No, no, not nearly as much. And so I kind of go back and forth on that. So I occasionally, or if I'm feeling good about where I'm at in the game, I feel like they haven't caught me doing anything silly. I'll use that. Now, if things are going poorly, I know that a hand or two of super light three bet bluffs have made it a showdown. Then I tend to cut these type of hands out as a three bet bluff, and focus more on weaker suited hands versus the high folders. Yeah, even though we connected with this flop, I think that's a fine bet. Yeah, we tripped up. Okay, yeah, the bet sizing's okay. I actually would have gone 11 here. We don't want to scare the guy off. Although we do have to consider, get him in on the river. It doesn't make a lot of difference. I mean, the bigger you can get away with on the turn, the more likely you're going to get a river call, because he's going to feel more committed to the pot, and that's one of the reasons you might up it. I would have liked the larger sizing. I would have actually gone about $1 larger if it hadn't been a spade, because I'm not sitting here scared that this guy has spades. What I'm scared about is if he's got ace jack, that he folds, because now he doesn't beat hardly anything. And so I want to keep those bluff. I want to keep more bluff catchers in, and I feel like maybe 11 would do that a little bit better job than 12. But I mean, we're really getting into some very, very, very subjective things, and we already know this player plays three bet. His results in three bet pots post flop has been very, very strong. So I don't really want to second guess that. I absolutely think you just need to go ahead and bet here. If he's got a full house or if he's got a flush, so be it. But especially when someone has been showdown prone, they'll talk themselves into a bluff catch, especially with like an ace queen, maybe even with an ace jack, just feeling like you're going to never value bet worse here. Well, obviously we're not going to value bet worse, but feeling like enough, like maybe like one spade draws missed. I don't know what they'd be thinking, but typically, I mean, if their showdown is high, they've got to be calling more hands. So definitely, I would be betting here against most players unless they're really tight. And I definitely think that as a check, you're not gonna induce any bluffs or anything like that. So check and deduce, I don't think, is on the table. Another thing I didn't really consider on the turn is our opponent could have a decent number of one spade hands, which would make me want to go a little bit on the larger size there. Especially someone that's sticky is not going to fold, say like a second, third, maybe fourth nut, four flush draw, and we want to make sure we maximize value there. It'd be like a pair plus probably a decent a four flush draw type of combo. Yeah, table two definitely going to isolate. Actually, that's not an isolate. The three bet versus the EP min open. Whew. So table two, we make what looks to be a decently strong move, but against two short stacks, and then this player over here jams in. Looking at his stats. Yeah, we don't have many hands on him, and I can't tell if there's no data next to 3 bet or 4 bet, or if it's the problem is maybe those numbers are red and I can't quite see them. But yeah, I think fold was the right choice there. Um, I mean, even if the guy is bluffing there, he's probably using like an ace queen type hand to bluff. I seriously doubt he's going to take something like eights or nines and jam there. Even though you're against two short stacks, your ranges can be quite wide there. I don't think eights or nines are in there, and I would need to see some data to back up a high 3 bet, high 4 bets. Obviously, if high squeeze. I mean, none of those situations, fit this. There's actually, if you have a lot of hands on somebody inside the pop-up, I have a cold 4 bet frequency, and also cold 4 bet and fold to a re-raise, a 5 bet. That helps us determine how much they're cold 4 bet bluffing there. But here he just jammed there. I typically think when a player jams like in a cold 4 bet type of spot, or basically any spot where he's going to have a hard time trying to sell you on a bluff. I tend to think of a jam as, at least when I do it, and other players I talk to do the same thing. The jam is like, if I bet small here, it's going to look super strong, so I might as well just jam here and make it look like I'm maybe trying to do something and try to push you off your hand, and I think it typically ends up being queens plus quite a bit, and I also do it with my ace king in those spots like that, and I'm thinking typically of like cold 4 bet spots, maybe a 4 bet spot for me when I'm in early position or middle position. Those are typically spots where I'll end up doing that because I just feel like if I 4 bet there to a 4 bet and fold size, that it just looks way too strong, and the jam will actually look slightly weaker. Okay, so he does. In one previous example, we saw this player fold. I think it was an ace four, ace five off in on the button, and now he does open it. And I also notice now he's using a smaller opening sizes. So there's something about his opponents that I assume changes his opening, which I think is fine. I do the exact same thing. Um, Basically, my bet sizing is based upon what they force my ranges to be. The tighter they force my ranges to be, the bigger my sizing. In addition, I use no caddy generated information as to their fold frequency versus different sizes, and so independent of what range they force me to, I can go with a different bet size, because there are some players that, even though I said that min open is the very worst size, there's some players that still fold a great deal to min opens, and that's enough to make that min opening size profitable. And I didn't really talk about this. I think it was in the last video where I was talking about my work analyzing open sizes, because it's not just their fold frequency that matters. Um, what can matter as much, or probably even more, is what happens when you are bloating the pot with your value hands, the amount of value you extract. And so if you're using a size that is less than optimal, part of that, or even all of that, can come from part of your worst results, lower win rate, can come from the fact that you're not getting enough value out of your big hands, either by causing too many folds or not building the big pot up big enough. And I think when it comes to three betting, it's getting too many folds. When I think min opening, I think the problem with min opening is you give your opponents too great of odds, plus you don't build the pot up for the top of your range. All right, let's go ahead and finish up the hands we're currently on, and that'll be it for this video. All right, so table two, this will be our last hand. We opened up ace four suited. We flopped a gut shot plus a backdoor flush draw. This is an absolute requirement to c-bet. Okay, now we catch a little bit something on the turn that may change what we want to do. So we want to look at our opponent. Now they called us. Part of the problem here is they called us with another player left to act. Now, yeah, they're coming in at a 31-15 over a small sample size, so they could be a recreational, they could be a regular player, and we really have no information as far as how often they're folding versus c-bets, double barrels. They're going to showdown in average frequency. I'm going to say the chances of them having a hand here are pretty high. Now, if I turned a club, I would for sure be barreling that because my equity's high enough, especially if that club could be a scare card, and so I might be able to fold them off, say like pocket fours, pocket fives, something like that. I don't think I'm going to get them off of many like 7Xs or better, but I might be able to fold out some value hands. That four is nothing of a scare card. You know, if he was floating this light with two overcards, we now have him beat. So I think the play here is to check, especially since it was three-way on the flop. Let me confirm that I'm not losing my mind. Yeah, it was three-way on the flop, which makes him much more higher chance that he has a value hand. Now, without it being three-handed on the flop, that certainly would give him a lot more air here, but it doesn't really change that much because now we beat all those air hands. And I don't think he's going to double float us with like some sort of overcard. So while we would be giving away some equity with a check here against those air hands, I'm okay with this. But in this situation with the player left to act, I feel like we're betting into a value hand way too often here. And when we do get a fold, we had the best hand. All right, we get a nice little gut shot here. Now, we don't have a lot of hands on this guy, but, and this is, you know, I was talking earlier, actually I'm going to pause this here. We're almost 50 minutes here. So I'm going to go ahead and back this up a little bit, and this will be the start of video 4, which will probably be the last I can do out of this recorded play. Yeah, I don't want to get into a whole new set of hands because it looks like we have a hand on table 3 we'll be playing also. So, yeah, we'll end this here. Guys, as always, appreciate you listening. If you have any comments or critiques, put them in the comment section.